To the outside world, the Matthews family represented everything good and pure about small-town living. Nestled on a quiet street in a charming Georgia suburb, their two-story colonial home was surrounded by manicured hedges, a white picket fence, and a backyard large enough for weekend barbecues and children's birthday parties. The American dream in its truest form, or so it seemed. James Matthews, 42, was the kind of man people admired. A meticulous accountant with a reputation for integrity, James worked long hours at a respected firm in Atlanta. He was quiet but dependable, a man who prided himself on providing for his family. He coached Little League on weekends, paid his taxes early, and never missed Sunday service at church. Some neighbors joked he could have run for mayor and won by a landslide. He was just that well-liked. Lena Matthews, his wife of 12 years, was the epitome of suburban grace. She was the kind of woman who turned heads without even trying. She ran the home with effortless precision, baked cookies for the PTA meetings, and volunteered at the local library on Wednesday afternoons. People whispered she could have been a model in another life, but she chose family over fame. Her Instagram was a gallery of seemingly perfect moments, sun-drenched family picnics, anniversary dinners, selfies with the kids, and adoring tributes to her amazing husband. Together, James and Lena had 2 children, Olivia, 9, and Ethan, 6. They were polite, well-dressed, and always on time for school. The Matthews kids were a reflection of their parents, orderly, respectful, and involved in everything from piano lessons to soccer tournaments. At church events, they sat quietly beside their mother, hands folded, never causing a stir. Their house was just as pristine on the inside as it was outside. Lena had an eye for design, neutral tones, farmhouse decor, scented candles in every room. Family portraits lined the staircase. In the living room, framed quotes about love and faith hung on the walls. There was no trace of chaos, no sign of turmoil, just harmony. But perfection, as many learned too late, can be a mask. Behind the curated smiles and neighborhood charm, Lena felt a slow-burning emptiness that no amount of baking or Bible study could fill. James, in his devotion to work and providing, had become distant, reliable, yes, but emotionally unavailable. Their conversations had grown mechanical. Their intimacy was practically non-existent. Lena began to feel less like a wife and more like a ghost drifting through her own life. Still, she smiled. She laughed at barbecues. She packed lunchboxes and made heart-shaped pancakes on Valentine's Day. She even posted a selfie of her and James, smiling on the porch, captioned, "My rock, my best friend, my everything." It got over 200 likes. No one saw the quiet desperation behind her eyes. No one questioned the mask. Until it slipped. It began with a broken sprinkler head. In the summer of 2022, the Matthews backyard had started to show signs of neglect. Overgrown patches of grass, wilting flower beds, and a busted irrigation system that left muddy puddles near the porch. James had promised to fix it for weeks, but as always, work came first. With company audits piling up and tax season around the corner, the lawn took a back seat. So Lena called for help. A neighbor referred her to a local landscaper, Darren Holt. He was 28, with tan skin, sun-bleached hair, and a lazy swagger that suggested confidence, even if his resume didn't. Darren wasn't from their world of carpool schedules and homeowner association rules. He lived in a one-bedroom apartment downtown, worked odd jobs, and drove an old pickup that coughed smoke. But he had strong arms, a charming grin, and a way of making Lena feel seen. The first day he showed up, shirt damp with sweat and muscles flexing under the Georgia sun. Lena offered him iced tea and a smile. It was innocent at first. She found herself watching him from the kitchen window, mesmerized by the way he moved, the way he wiped his brow with the edge of his shirt. He caught her watching once, and instead of looking away, he smiled. A slow, knowing grin that made her stomach twist. Their small talk grew longer with each visit. Darren teased her about her perfect lawn. She teased him about his stubborn mower. She laughed more in those short exchanges than she had in years. And beneath the flirtation, something darker was beginning to stir. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Desire. Lena hadn't been touched by her husband in months. Their kisses had become routine pecks, their evenings spent in silence. Darren was the opposite of James. Unpolished, unpredictable, dangerous. And that danger thrilled her. The affair didn't start with a kiss. It started with a brush of the hand, a lingering touch on her wrist as she passed him a glass of lemonade. Then came the late-night texts. Short, suggestive, laced with tension. Still awake. Can't stop thinking about you. Wish I was there instead of him. Lena knew it was wrong. She told herself she'd stop. But each message fed the fire. And before long, one sultry August afternoon, when the kids were at summer camp and James was at a client meeting, she invited Darren inside. They didn't make it past the hallway. What began as an impulsive kiss turned into an explosive release of months, maybe years of repression. It was reckless, raw, and intoxicating. She felt alive in a way she hadn't since her wedding night. And when it was over, she didn't feel guilt. Not yet. She felt powerful. That one afternoon turned into a pattern. Quick rendezvous on Thursdays. Risky meetups in the guest room. Even an encounter in the garage while James mowed the front lawn, unaware of the betrayal happening just feet away. Lena knew they were playing with fire. But the thrill was worth the risk. Darren became possessive quickly. He hated hearing her talk about James, even in passing. He called him boring, weak. He joked about taking care of him. Lena laughed it off, but deep down, a part of her wondered, what if? What if she didn't have to sneak around anymore? What if James just disappeared? It was a fantasy then, a fleeting, taboo thought, until it wasn't. It was a Tuesday evening, unusually quiet, the kind of dusky, humid Georgia twilight where the air clings to your skin and the world slows just enough for secrets to breathe. James Matthews wasn't supposed to be home early. His meeting in Atlanta had run shorter than expected. He didn't text Lena to let her know. He thought he'd surprise her, maybe take her out for dinner. God knew they needed it. Lately, he had felt the distance between them, like a crack forming in the foundation of their marriage. She'd been more distracted, more distant. He thought maybe flowers and a spontaneous date night might help. So, with a bouquet of peonies in one hand and his car keys in the other, he pulled into the driveway just after 6:20 p.m., an hour earlier than usual. The house was quiet, too quiet. He stepped inside and called her name. No answer. The flowers dangled awkwardly from his fingers as he wandered through the living room. Then the hallway. Something felt off. A strange tension in the air, like walking into a room where someone had just been arguing. Then he heard it. A muffled sound. A creak. Movement from upstairs. James's brow furrowed. The kids were still at swim practice. Lena had dropped them off herself. So who was upstairs? He moved quietly, the way a husband does when he senses something is wrong but hasn't accepted it yet. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. And that's when he saw it. A man's shirt draped over the edge of the dresser. The scent of sweat and perfume hung in the air like poison. James's breath caught in his throat. For a moment he couldn't move, couldn't think. Then he pushed the door open. The scene that greeted him would never leave his mind. Lena, in their bed, with another man, bare skin tangled in sheets, lips locked, bodies twisted in betrayal. Darren turned first, startled like an animal caught in a snare. Lena froze, eyes wide, a gasp caught in her throat. James didn't speak, didn't shout. He just stood there, stunned, paralyzed by the weight of what he was seeing. The bouquet of flowers fell from his hand to the floor, petals scattering like shattered glass. James, Lena finally whispered, her voice trembling, but he was already turning, walking away, down the stairs, out the front door, into the night. He didn't slam the door. He didn't scream. That was what scared Lena the most, because silence is louder than rage. That evening, Lena tried to call him 10, 20 times. No answer. His phone rang into voicemail. Darren, still half-dressed and rattled, suggested he leave town for a few days. Lay low. But Lena wasn't worried about Darren. She was worried about what James would do now that the truth was out. Would he take the kids? Would he file for divorce? Tell the church? Ruin her? The mask had shattered. The perfect picture. Gone in a blink. And somewhere in the darkness, as Lena sat shaking in their kitchen, the reality sank in. He knew, and he wouldn't stay quiet. The days that followed James's discovery were thick with tension, each one heavier than the last. James never came home that night. He didn't return the next day either. Lena told the children he was on a business trip. She forced a smile through dinner, read bedtime stories with a hollow warmth, and checked the front door every 10 minutes like a prisoner awaiting judgment. Her hands trembled each time the phone rang, half expecting to hear his voice, or worse, a lawyer's. But James didn't call. He didn't file anything. He simply vanished into silence. And that silence was more terrifying than confrontation. By day 3, Lena's panic had mutated into dread. She imagined him in a hotel room, brooding, plotting, maybe collecting evidence, maybe already preparing to take the kids, the house, everything. The man she had betrayed wasn't stupid. He was measured, calculated, and silence was never a good sign with someone like that. Darren, on the other hand, was losing patience. I should have handled him then and there, he snapped, pacing across Lena's living room, anger bubbling beneath his skin. You saw his face. He's not gonna let this go. Lena sat curled on the couch, wringing her hands. He's not violent, Darren. He's just processing. Processing? You think this ends with him disappearing quietly? The guy walked in on us screwing in his bed. Lena, you think he's gonna forgive that with a prayer and a handshake? She didn't respond, because he was right. Darren lowered his voice, crouching in front of her. We have to think ahead. We have to protect ourselves. Her eyes met his. What are you saying? He hesitated. Just a beat. Then he said it. We make sure he never gets the chance to ruin us. Lena's stomach twisted. You mean? I'm saying maybe this ends one way. The clean way. Her body recoiled, as if slapped. Are you insane? You think I want this? You think this is easy for me? He hissed. But open your eyes, Lena. If he goes to court, you lose everything. The kids, the house, your reputation. The PDA will crucify you. Your church will exile you. She looked away, breathing shallow, eyes brimming with tears. He's going to destroy you, Darren added quietly. And us. Lena stared at the floor, the air around her thick with moral suffocation. The idea of murder wasn't something she could process, at least not immediately. But Darren's words planted a seed. A dangerous one. A seed watered by fear, shame, and desperation. That night, after Darren left, Lena stood at the kitchen sink long after the dishes were clean. Her reflection stared back at her in the dark window. Tired, haunted, unrecognizable. She didn't want James dead, but she also didn't want to lose everything. She thought about Olivia's recital next month, Ethan's science fair, the life she had built, fragile as it was. Could she really let James burn it all down? And then, something inside her cracked. Maybe it wouldn't have to be violent. Maybe there was a way to make it look accidental. It started as a whisper in her mind. Then it became a plan. A week had passed since James vanished into silence. Lena was unraveling, but not in public. In public, she smiled. She brushed Olivia's hair into neat ponytails for school. She sat through parent-teacher meetings and laughed politely with neighbors. She was the same Lena everyone knew and adored. But behind closed doors, her mind was a storm of paranoia and urgency. James was alive. She knew that now. She'd received a single message, anonymous number, no reply possible. Just 5 words. We'll talk when I'm ready. That was James. Calculated. Strategic. Dangerous when cornered. She knew then that her life was no longer her own. It belonged to whatever game he was about to play. And she couldn't afford to lose. Darren came over after midnight. The kids were asleep. The curtains were drawn. The bottle of wine on the counter remained unopened. They sat in silence for a long time before either of them spoke. I looked into it, Darren finally said. His voice was low, expression unreadable. There's a spot. Out near Lake Dorset. No cameras. No cell towers. No neighbors for miles. Just woods and water. Lena stared at him, numb. He pulled out a folded sheet of paper. A map printed from his office computer. Circled coordinates. Handwritten notes. We make it look like an accident, he continued. He drowns. A boating trip gone wrong. Maybe he gets drunk. Slips. Falls. The current handles the rest. Lena felt the bile rise in her throat. We can't. We have to, he interrupted. If we don't, he'll tear your life apart, Lena. You think this man is going to take the high road? After what we did? She didn't answer. She already knew. Darren softened his tone. You'll never survive this scandal. He'll take the kids. Your name. Your world. We're doing this for you. For them. Lena looked at the kitchen table. The same one she and James had bought from that antique store on their 3rd anniversary. She whispered, I don't want to know how. You won't, he said. For the next few days, Lena played her part like an actress on opening night. She invited her mother over for lunch, volunteered at church. She even smiled at old Mr. Bickman across the street when he waved during his morning walks. But beneath the lipstick and clean apron, her heart pounded like a ticking bomb. Darren handled everything, rented the boat under a fake name, picked the date, prepared the story. James had finally agreed to meet him after receiving a carefully crafted email. Darren told him they needed to settle this like men. Talk in private. Somewhere quiet. James agreed. Almost too easily. Lena couldn't sleep the night before it was supposed to happen. The idea that her husband, the man who once rubbed her feet while she was pregnant, who cried when their son was born, would soon be dead, crushed her. But she also remembered the look in his eyes when he caught her. The silence that screamed betrayal. The humiliation. The grief. The coldness. She wasn't killing James out of hatred. She was doing it out of fear. Fear of losing everything. Fear of being exposed. Fear of what he might become. She whispered a prayer in the dark, though she didn't know who she was praying to anymore. The sun rose slowly over Lake Dorset, casting soft gold across the rippling surface. It was the kind of morning that begged for peace, silent, misty, almost sacred. But beneath its calm beauty, something dark was waiting. James arrived first. He pulled up in a silver SUV, alone as requested. His posture was straight, shoulders squared, but the exhaustion was visible in his eyes. He'd lost weight. His face was pale, almost gaunt, but his stare remained unflinching. Darren was already there, leaning against a rented flat-bottom boat tied to the old dock. He wore gloves. No prints. He carried 2 beers, just enough to build a story if anyone asked later. James said nothing as he approached. He simply looked at Darren, lips tight. You wanted to talk, Darren said. James nodded. Let's go out. No interruptions. The lake was vast and surrounded by thick woods. No houses. No cameras. No one to hear a scream. The 2 men sat at opposite ends of the boat. The motor buzzed low, carving a soft path through the mist. Darren offered a beer. James took it but didn't drink. You know I could end your life, James finally said, staring into the fog. Darren's hand stiffened. I figured as much. I could take the kids, the house. I could file charges, drag your name through the dirt. Both of you. But you haven't. James took a long breath. I'm not the man you think I am. Silence fell. And then something strange. James smiled. See, I realized something. I don't have to destroy you, he said, eyes now glinting. You're going to destroy each other. All I had to do was step back and let it happen. Darren's brow furrowed. James continued, leaning back. You think Lena's loyal? You think she'll keep quiet after this? You're nothing more than a fantasy, Darren. A midlife crisis with muscles. Darren's jaw clenched. James chuckled darkly. When the cops show up, you'll be the fall guy. She'll say you manipulated her, forced her, maybe even raped her. That's the story people love. The villain. The victim. He leaned forward now, voice low. You came out here to kill me. But I came out here to bury you. Darren snapped. Without a word, he lunged. The boat rocked violently as Darren tackled James, grabbing his throat, rage unleashed like a beast unchained. But James fought back, harder than expected. They tumbled, fists flying. The boat spun in place. The cooler tipped, beer cans splashing into the water. A flare gun Darren had brought clattered across the floor of the boat. And then it happened. James slipped. Or maybe he was pushed. His head struck the edge of the boat. Crack. His body went limp. And then, with a splash, he was gone. Vanished into the lake's cold embrace. Darren sat frozen for several minutes, blood pounding in his ears. He looked down at the spot James had vanished. No bubbles. No movement. Just silence. He waited 10 minutes. Then 15. Nothing surfaced. He had no choice. He started the motor and turned back toward the dock, hands shaking. The air smelled different now. Metallic. Foul. Back on land, Darren stripped off his gloves, dumped them in a trash bag along with the beers, and drove away with the kind of calm that only deep fear can bring. When he returned to her house later that night, Lena was sitting in the kitchen, staring at a photo of her family taken 2 summers ago, before all of this, before the affair, before the betrayal. He said nothing, just nodded once. "It's done?" she asked, voice small. He hesitated, then nodded again. "He's gone." She didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She just got up, walked to the sink, and started washing the dishes, one by one, like nothing had happened. But something had. Something they could never undo. The lake was still again, as if it had swallowed the truth whole. But nature has a way of rejecting violence, of giving back the things it's forced to hide. 5 days had passed since James vanished into the depths of Lake Dorset. Lena and Darren tried to carry on as if the world hadn't shifted beneath their feet. She filed a missing person report 2 days after his disappearance. Tears perfectly timed, voice trembling just enough. I don't know where he went," she told the officer. "He's been distant for weeks. I thought maybe he needed space, but he never came home." Darren kept his distance in public, just as they'd agreed. No late-night visits. No phone calls that could be traced. No paper trails. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. Until the storm came. 2 teenage boys were fishing off the south end of Lake Dorset when they noticed something strange caught in the reeds. A shape, bloated, pale. One of them, thinking it might be a deer, rode closer. What they found instead would haunt them forever. It was a body, male, face barely recognizable. But the wedding ring, engraved with the initials JL, and the date July 15, 2012, told the police everything they needed to know. And with him came the unraveling. Detective Rachel Torres had seen her share of drownings, but this wasn't one. There were bruises on the neck, defensive wounds on the hands, a gash on the forehead inconsistent with a fall. James hadn't drowned. He'd been killed. The news spread quickly through the quiet town. A missing husband turned homicide. Lena's front porch filled with reporters within hours. She played the role flawlessly. Broken widow, clutching her children, begging for privacy. But behind her eyes, there was fear. Not for what she'd done, but for what Darren might do next. Darren unraveled faster than Lena expected. The pressure, the guilt, the media frenzy, it got to him. He stopped showing up to work. Neighbors said he looked like a ghost. He drank more, talked less. Detectives noticed. And then came the first mistake. A surveillance camera from a gas station 20 miles from the lake showed a black SUV, rented under a fake name, pulling into the lot the morning James disappeared. The driver matched Darren's description. Worse, when they searched rental databases, they found a boat rented that same day. Same time. It was enough to bring him in for questioning. Darren cracked after 9 hours in an interrogation room. He didn't confess, not fully, but his story was full of holes. He mentioned meeting James once, then said he hadn't seen him in months. He contradicted himself, changed his timeline. Detective Torres knew what she was looking at. He was hiding something, and he wasn't hiding it alone. By the end of that week, Lena opened her door to find detectives standing with a search warrant in hand. They turned the house upside down. Computers, cell phones, tablets, letters, pictures. They found a journal. Lena's. In it, one single line stood out. "If James ever finds out, he'll ruin us both." And just like that, Lena's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. The trial of Lena and Darren Miles became a media storm almost overnight. Dubbed the Lake Affair murder, reporters and true crime fans descended on the courthouse like vultures. The narrative had everything. An illicit affair, a hidden motive, a husband's suspicious death, and a community betrayed. Inside the courtroom, tension hung heavy in the air, thick with secrets waiting to explode. Prosecutor Angela Braxton opened strong. She stood in front of the jury, holding up a wedding photo of Lena and James, smiling on a beach years before the betrayal. Then she pointed to Darren, sitting at the defense table in a wrinkled suit, eyes hollow. "This," she said, holding the photo, "was the life James Langford thought he had. A wife who loved him, a family he trusted. But while he was working to build that life, these two," she pointed to Lena and Darren, "were tearing it apart behind his back. And when he found out, they didn't just lie. They killed him." Gasps echoed in the courtroom. The prosecution rolled out text messages between Lena and Darren. Flirtations, rendezvous, threats about James discovering the affair. One message sent by Darren read, "He finds out, we're done. He won't stop." Another from Lena, 2 days before James's disappearance. "Then maybe he needs to disappear." It was enough to make the jury lean in. Lena's attorney tried to shift the blame. She was afraid, the defense claimed. James was controlling, possessive. Darren was her escape. When James confronted them, things spiraled. But she didn't plan this. She didn't want this. But Lena's calm demeanor, even under cross-examination, made the jury uneasy. She cried at the right times, but it felt rehearsed. She claimed James was aggressive and unstable, yet had no records of domestic violence, no complaints, no witnesses. Darren's testimony was the moment everything turned. Nervous, sweating, he told the court he met James to talk, not to kill, that James attacked him, that it was an accident. "I didn't mean for him to die," he said, his voice shaking. But the prosecution pounced. "You brought gloves, a flare gun, you rented a boat, you dumped the body. That doesn't sound like an accident, Mr. Miles." He looked over at Lena, who didn't look back. "You killed him, and she helped cover it up. Isn't that the truth?" Darren didn't answer, but his silence said enough. Just when the defense thought things couldn't get worse, the prosecution revealed a secret weapon. An audio file. A conversation recorded weeks after James's death, between Lena and a friend. Lena didn't know she was being recorded. In it, her voice was unmistakable. "If he hadn't followed us that day, none of this would have happened. James did this to himself." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. No remorse, no denial, just cold justification. Took the jury less than 2 days. Guilty. On all counts. Lena was sentenced to life without parole. Darren Miles received 35 years, eligible for parole in 28. They didn't look at each other once after the verdict was read. Whatever bond they thought, they had died with James in the waters of Lake Dorset.